so let me find our document. Are we recording?
You are.
Okay, so it's 9:31. As chair of Division 3 of the House Finance Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic in accordance with Governor's Emergency Order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 as extended, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we are providing the public with access by telephone and by Zoom. The committee is using Zoom for this remote meeting. All members of the committee and staff of the state agencies with agenda items have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform. And the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom or phone, following the directions and links provided in the House calendar, starting at House Calendar 8, running in every calendar through 15. The public has been noticed that they can access this meeting by the instructions that are found in the House calendar, to include by calling in. If people are not able to access this meeting, we ask that you email us at lba_fiscal, FISCAL @leg.state.nh.us. If you let us know that you're having a problem, the public is having a problem, then we will adjourn and reschedule our meeting. Please note that any votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call. Now let's start the meeting with taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there's anyone in the room with you during this meeting. It's required by the right to know law. So Mr. Clerk, are you ready to take a roll?
I am.
Please.
Representative Irf,
Present, home alone in my home office.
Representative Weiler, I'm here in Concord in my office. Representative Bean,
I'm home in Guilford. My wife is here. She's doing some things in the other room.
Representative Wallner,
I'm in my home in Concord and my husband is in the other room.
Representative Nordgren. Come back to her. Representative Rogers.
Catherine Rogers, I'm in Concord in my apartment. No one's here except my dog Romeo.
Representative Edwards.
Representative Edwards in my home office in Auburn. I have family in the house, but my office door is shut.
Members present except for Representative Nordgren. I'm sure she'll show up in a little bit.
She's here.
I'm
She's
here.
ready.
I didn't
Okay,
take-
Representative Nordgren is present.
Yes.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. So my calendar for today listed several sections of House Bill 2 that I wanted us to discuss and get a feel for if we're ready to pass it or if we have issues with it. Specifically, we're going to talk about sections 21, 23, 24, 25, and 28. Then I've asked Mr. Ripple to prepare to give us sort of a little tutorial on the history of uses of lapses, because I've heard about it 3 or 4 times, and I think I have a general idea, but I need to hear it another time to be more clear on it. If we have time, I'd like to continue having us talk about HB2 items. We heard from the Veterans Home, I believe it was sections 106, 107, 108, and we can just introduce those and talk about them, see if what the general sense of the committee is relative to them. And then I would like us to take sort of a focused redive around 5 accounts. Those 5 accounts are Medicaid, CHIP, TANF, MMIS, and the county cap. When we're talking about the county cap, I want us to take a look at a Word document that the governor's office shared with us yesterday evening, showing what they project to be coming from the federal government and how it's going to be distributed in a way that bypasses the state completely and goes straight to counties, cities, and municipalities. So we should have situational awareness of that money as we take a look at the county cap. So that's what I think our agenda is for today. One of our members has a medical appointment at 3 and needs to leave before that to get there. So I'm kind of hoping to be done around 2-ish, 2:15 or so. And then so that's kind of my plan. Representative Nordgren?
Yes, could we please have our lunch break at 12:15 to 1 o'clock?
Let's try for that. I don't see why we couldn't.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments about why we're gathered here today? I do want to do one more update, and I'll bring you in, Mr. Representative Weiler. Go ahead. What would you like to add, sir?
We were having that 8 o'clock meeting with the governor this morning on this money that's coming in from this Recovery Act. And it appears that it will all come through the state. And in some cases, some of the small towns and so on will just be kind of pulling it down because that way they avoid the auditing and the accounting that the state would then have to do. So it's liable to come through the state. Thank you.
So I have a question for you on that. Is that just an administrative pass through though? Do we have the authority as a state to change dollar amounts for any designated counties or designated municipalities? Or is it just administratively passed through us?
Administratively passed through, but of course the other warning is it's going to be a while before it's all there. And it won't all come right away. And you might get 50% of it at a time, and it might go to the next year. So don't get excited and spend it all at once, kind of thing.
Okay, thank you for that, and we'll come back to it and have a deeper talk. Representative Wallner, did you have?
I think Chairman Weiler just answered my question. I guess my question was, when do we think we're going to receive this money? And it sounds like it's sort of up in the air.
Yeah, it may not be till the fall.
Okay. And Representative Weiler, do you know, and I certainly could take a look at this myself, but do you know if there's going to be, like in that first CARES Act, there were timelines around when the money had to be spent? Is that part of this? Do you know if that's going to be, if counties and towns are going to have to expend the money by a certain date?
There was no information on that yet. They're still waiting. They think some of it may come through the Treasury. Treasury may be the ones making the rules. So that's going to be a while.
Okay, thank you.
So just an update on that. I received, Naomi and I received our $2,800 overnight, and it was a nice little Christmas present this morning. So some of the money's flowing through the system already. Mr. Ripple, did you mean to say something?
Oh, I'm all set.
All right, so to close out a conversation point that we had yesterday around whether or not we would post our working document, I've with Mr. Ripple's help and Mr. Jim Ciani's input, I've decided that we should just go ahead and post our working document. I would like every page clearly marked, working draft subject to frequent changes, and our final is due 24 March. Because I'm still concerned that posting a working document that changes every few minutes is not good communication with the public. It's going to be more confusing. So I just want that document, when it's shared on the website, to be properly disclaimed, because it will immediately frighten people who think that, who are concerned that their accounts will be diminished, and that is not the right way to view it. So, but we can't control how people will view things. With that, I think we're ready to talk about section 21. Do you want to, are you ready to share it, Mr. Ripple? Can you put it up so we're all looking at the same thing?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so I think you all have looked at this a number of times. This is about allowing authority for unfunded positions to be funded based on the availability of money. And I think, as I remember our discussion around this, Representative Weiler, you had some thoughts on it, and I'd like to just verify that if you have an amendment, or whether you would like this section dropped, I'd like to know what you're thinking so that Mr. Ripple can work on it.
Okay, this is similar to what we did in the previous budget, but what we did was we said, here's your limit. And I think we limited the number of employees as well. And if they had a couple of retirements or people resigning, then that left gaps that they could fill with some positions that were unfunded at that moment, but approved. So this wouldn't change it that much, according to what we put in the budget for positions. So if we accepted this, we'd still have control by how much money we put in class 10. And so it's kind of like what we did before. It's a little more generous, but we could probably stand it. I don't know as we need to change it markedly.
Okay, so because I studied computer science, I got to be really precise on this. I'm sorry. What I think I just heard you say is you have no recommended changes to section 21, that you would accept it word for word, comma for comma.
Correct.
All right. That I can understand. Is there any other committee conversation around section 21? I'm not seeing any. For the public, the way I would like to do this is to get through all of the sections that we plan on talking about today. If you want to speak on any of these sections, we'll entertain questions about what we've discussed before we take any votes. So did you have a question, Representative Woolner? You went for your screen.
No, I'm fine with this section.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's go on to section 23. Go ahead, Representative Woolner. It sounds like you do have something you might want to
Well,
say.
no, I just wondered, are we going to vote on these as we go along, or?
I think if I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try a block vote at the end if we have, what seems to be strong agreement on all of them. So like, for example, the one we just talked about, I might couple it with 2 or 3 other ones if nobody's voicing any concerns about them. So I'm trying to figure out ways to have our votes and be a little quicker about it.
Okay, thank you.
Section 23. This is about allowing the COLAs to increase eligibility levels so that people don't fall out of eligibility due to a cost of living adjustment. So I think, as I remember my notes on this, this is something that may actually be required by federal law for us to continue receiving some federal funds. Does anyone have any further and my conclusion is I think I'm fine with section 23, but I want to hear from anyone who may have other information or other viewpoints.
I think I'd ask Mr. Ripple if this is in there on a routine basis. I think it is.
It is. It's definitely in the current 2021 trailer bill. I have to go back further than that, but I think it's been in for the past several bills, yes.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, oh, I see Karen Rounds on there too. At some point, we might just pull her in as a panelist.
Okay. Do you want me to do that now?
I think it's fine. I think we may end up with a question for her. Now, section 24, county reimbursement. This is a lot on the county cap area. This, I think we need to talk about this in conjunction with the federal money that's coming down. So I would like to defer 24 a little bit so that we can knock out some of these other sections that may be more approachable. So we're going to come back to 24, but let's for a moment go to section 25. Now, my notes on section 25 had me a little bit confused. What I think section 25, the effect of 25 is if we accept the amendment from 2023 from 2021 to 2023, that we will continue a trend that started in around 2011, and that this in effect saves the state some money. And if we decided to quit doing this, we would have to find some money to put into one of our activity codes. I think that's the background on this. Does anyone have any comments? If the committee doesn't have any comments, this is one I'd like to just hear from either Mr. Ripple or Ms. Rounds on to make sure that we're clear on the effect of this. Before we do that, Representative Wallner, do you want to let Ms. Rounds speak first and then you ask? Okay.
That's what I was going to ask you to do, bring up Karen to talk about this section. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Rounds,
Good morning. So I'm just looking at the notes that John Williams provided to me. So I do know that he did provide me some language so this has been putting off the repeal since 2011. So he did provide me with language to repeal the repeal. So this would no longer need to be in every trailer bill. If that's something the committee is interested in, I can provide that. And I'm just, hold on just one second. I just want to make sure that I say this correctly. Yeah, so the HB 191, which was the original law for this, apparently allowed CMHCs to prioritize delivery of services based on an individual's clinical needs, essentially allowing for a wait list. That has not been needed, and there's not been a wait list. So we continue to hold off on this because of that, that it's been properly funded and there's not been an issue. So I think it's fine to leave it the way it is, but if we want to stop putting in HB2 year after year, it's been 10 years and we've kept it the same, we can do something to eliminate it completely.
All right, Representative, I have a question for you on there, but I see Representative Weiler's hand is up, and I know Representative Wallner may have a question. Representative Weiler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if we did have more people becoming eligible than we had funds for, we'd still have to go to a waiting list. So maybe we shouldn't eliminate this if that's connected to waiting lists.
Quick question.
Yes.
All right, do you mind if we bring Katya over? Katya is the Director for Behavioral Health. She can probably give you a more in-depth explanation than I can.
Okay, this is bigger than behavioral health though, isn't it? This is the whole Medicaid program, isn't it?
It is, but Katya is familiar with the behavioral health pieces of the Medicaid program.
Before Ms. Fox speaks, I think we got to put a couple more things out on the table. Representative Weiler, your hand is still up. Okay, Representative Wallner, did you have something?
No, but I would like to hear from Ms. Fox for sure about this one.
Okay. So the idea of having a wait list, it can be called different sorts of things, but Oregon implemented a system many years ago. It could well over a decade, where they racked and stacked all of the DRGs that Medicaid was paying for, from the most clinically useful to the least clinically effective. And so if they ever ran into a shortage of money, they would use that list to start prioritizing which clinical procedures they would continue to pay for and which ones would have to be wait out until there was more money available in the state. And although I don't like that system, I can see the potential for needing to have a system such as that. And so what I would like to know is, if we leave this language in here, does this leave us with the authority to create effectively a waiting list if we needed to do that in a worst case? So Representative Weiler, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. You'd run into the complication of you put money aside in this fund, and now you ran short of it in that fund, and you have to transfer money from one fund to another. You've got to go to fiscal. There's some delays, and then people that are looking at the money in the fund you took it from, why are you taking it out of our fund? It's not as easy as it looks, because it's all in separate funds. Plus, the percentages in each fund between federal and agency and general funds could be different in each case. So it's not as simple as it looks to adopt that system. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So if if Ms. Fox is ready to speak to us, I'd love to hear her.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Katya Fox. I'm the Director of the Division for Behavioral Health for the department. And what this language is so confusing, and every single time it comes up, we have to go back and do the history on it. If you think about the time period when it was put in, it was when we were struggling with our budget and had revenue issues as well. So this was put in to protect the community mental health centers, essentially, so that they were not stuck having to provide services when the state was not providing enough funding. And so this allowed them to create the so-called wait lists for services. And as Karen Round said, this has never had to happen, but it was a safety net. So it's really a safety net for the centers. Because of the continuous inclusion of this in the trailer bill, we're fine with it going away, and we're also fine with it staying. But that really is the point of it, is to protect the community mental health centers so they don't have to continue services when they don't have the means to pay for their staff and for the services.
Right. So if we ever got into a worst case scenario and the state didn't have money, wouldn't it be reasonable to say that the providers shouldn't be forced to provide services if they're not going to get reimbursed? Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Essentially what this does.
Thank you for that shining clarity. So are there any other comments from the committee? Is there a hand up in the audience there, Mr. Ripple?
There is. Could I actually make one comment, if you don't
Yes,
mind?
sir.
I think he would want to get a good look at the department's language before deciding what it would do, because as I understand, I think if it repeals the repeal, that would have the effect of leaving the existing language in place. And the existing language continues to make mental health services subject to available appropriations. So if you're repealing the repeal, you would be making that limitation permanent rather than extending it for another 2 years. That's confusing, I'm sorry.
No, you just ran into headspace limitations on my part is all. That's okay. So the bottom line is I don't want to leave the possibility that if the state runs out of money, that we would be compelling providers to provide unreimbursed care. So if that was the position we wanted to end up with, do we accept this language as it is and kick the can down to 2023? Or do we go with the Williams language to repeal the repeal? I mean, they can't both do the same thing.
I believe they both do the same thing. This does it for 2 years. And my understanding of the HHS language is it would do it permanently.
Is Mr. Williams in the audience with us today?
I think I see his phone number there.
Like to comment, he's more than
Sure.
welcome. Or if Ms. Rounds from her notes with Mr. Williams can speak to that leaving the existing language and using the Williams language gets us to the same place. It gets us to the point where the state can't compel providers to provide services.
That is my understanding, and I believe that I just sent Kevin the email with the language from Mr. Williams, and I think he had OLS maybe look at it or as well. So I know it would go through them again, but I do believe that that's what it does.
So I think based on that, we know we know enough, and I see Mr. Scavy with his hands up, but I think what we know is that we can't vote on this today. We need to share Mr. Williams' language with the committee members and have everyone think about which way they want to go. If we end up in the same spot by either sticking with HB2 as is or by using Mr. Williams' language, I would prefer the solution that is more long-term so that we get out of this kicking the can mode. But we need to all individually look at this and think about it. Are there any questions about the committee? I'd like to close out discussion on, which one are we on? We're on section 25, pending a further discussion after we see Mr. Williams' language. I'm not seeing any objections. Mr. Skibby, you took your hand down. I was just about to call you. If you think you have something relevant to the particular decision we're trying to make right now, we do want to hear you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Skibby from the Disability Rights Center. I think it's important to recognize that the law before the fiscal crisis of 2011 was, and I'll read it to you because it's right in the statute books. It was that admission to the mental health services system, the state's mental health services system, which includes the mental health centers, but it also includes other components of the state's mental health system, shall not be denied based on inability to pay. So basically, before 2011, there was a commitment by the state to care for poor people who are mentally ill. And in 2011, the mental health center said, we are concerned about that continuing in statute under the current crisis circumstances. So we would like to have the authority to create a wait list for mental health services. It's not a broad Medicaid provision. It's completely focused on poor people with mental health problems. And so a temporary change to the statute was adopted by the legislature, and it was to expire in 2 years. So that has been repeatedly, the can has been repeatedly been kicked down the road by saying, okay, it's not going to expire this time, it'll expire 2 years from now. And that's happened several times. And here we are again with kicking the can down the road. So I guess the question is there some reason that we should continue to operate as though we are under a fiscal crisis like we were in 2011? It seems to me that there is a theoretical possibility that we're going to run out of money for mental health services, but I really doubt that you're going to run out of money for admitting people to the New Hampshire hospital who are poor, for example. And it seems to me that it makes sense to remove this provision completely and return to the pre-existing, I would say, morally sound commitment by the state to care for poor people who are extremely mentally ill. I
Thank you,
certainly
Mr.
don't think.
Skibby. I would like to get a distinction here, though. As it was described prior to your testimony, this was about whether or not the state had money to pay the provider. I think pretty much everyone has accepted that the American health system accepts every poor patient regardless of their ability to pay. But this reads a little different to me if it's really that the state is no longer in a position to reimburse the provider. And so I see that Mr. Ripple has highlighted what he believes to be the critical part of the law. But would you just address that? Or are we talking about, which of these two things are we talking about? The state's inability to pay or the individual's ability to pay?
Well, the language refers to the state mental health services system, which is composed of the community services that are administered by the state and the institutional services that are administered by the state. So the community services are largely, but not solely, administered by the community mental health system, the community mental health centers. So the language is not only focused on community services, but I agree it's largely because of their concerns that it was adopted. So the highlighted language is the current law, which expires in July of this year. If you look down below, but what was the prior law and what will become law on July 1 is that eligibility shall not be denied based on a number of things, including inability to pay. Period, paragraph, not paragraph, but without the additional authority to create a wait list. So it's the question that you ought to be asking yourself is there some reason that we should walk away permanently from that commitment to poor people? Or should we continue to make it a temporary walking away from that, unqualified commitment? Or should we just put it off for another 2 years? So I think that I don't think that there's any reason to think that we are still in the emergency situation we were in 2011, and that there ought to be some presumption that we return to the commitment that was made, many years ago. And there's really no reason, to think that that commitment is not something that we can follow through on.
Yeah. Okay. So I do appreciate your testimony, and I think you've helped ratify the decision to postpone a further discussion and a vote on this because we need to see Mr. Williams' language. And I need to get into this paragraph that Mr. Ripple is highlighting for us. And I just would say that I, as I'm reading this, I'm going to try to be making the distinction between providing emergency services to the indigent, which is become an American value of our health system, and whether or not the state can compel private individuals to provide services that the state knows it's unable to pay for. That second category gets into a bit of an enslavement issue if you compel people without reimbursement to do work. So I do think these are different issues, and there's a philosophical nuance in there. And I don't know which side of that divide we're on until I reread all this. So,
Well, I do think that you can.
Mr. Skibby,
modify.
I don't want to debate. If you have some more written input for us as we review this overnight, it'd be great. I'd be happy to have us review it. But I would like to continue because we do have a full agenda today.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Unless you have something that you think is really relevant right now, I don't want to shut you down.
Oh, I think I removed his ability to talk. Hold on a second.
All I was going to say is that I think you can modify the statute so that you relieve community mental health programs of being required to provide services without payment, without walking away from the commitment to poor people. And I'll send you some suggested language.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. So I don't want to unilaterally make that decision, but I'm prepared to postpone further discussion on 25 until tomorrow or the day after. If anyone disagrees, on the committee, let me know. Otherwise, I think we're ready to take a look at section 28. Okay. So, Ms. Rounds, I'm going to invite you in here in just a moment. But as I understand what section 28 does, is it allows for there to be a fund that people can donate to, and that fund would then be available to help pay for emergency services. Am I close, or how far off am I?
No, you're pretty close. Kevin,
Your volume is really low for some reason.
oh, that's weird. Let me try. Is that any better?
That's much better.
Okay, all right, I will stay like this. Kevin, could you bring over Rebecca Ross just in case I forget to say something she can add? She's the legislative liaison for DCYF. So actually section 28 and section 29 go together. So I know you don't have 29 slated until tomorrow, but I'm just going to talk about them together because they're really for the same purpose. 28 adds the fund to the revolving account part of the statute and establishes the revolving account, and 29 talks about what the purpose of it is. So to talk about the purpose in basic terms, so DCYF has times when there is an emergency type situation that they need to resolve something immediately so that a child can stay in their home with their parents, or so that a foster family is fully prepared in that moment to take a child. So it could mean purchasing a crib or a car seat or formula or something like that. And it's literally something that needs to happen right now, right? So, so this is something that currently happens in DCYF. There is about $50,000 a year in general funds budgeted in the DCYF budget for this purpose. So about a year ago, I would say it was about a year ago, a year and a half ago, I became more aware of this process. And what I wanted to do is to make it a little bit more of a, to put more controls on it. That's what I'm trying to say, to put more controls on it by establishing this account for this to happen in, and for it to only happen in this account. And so that is the purpose of setting this up. The other thing, as we were working on this language with John Williams and Rebecca Ross and Director Ribsum, is one thing that I learned is that there are times that people call DCYF and want to make a donation. And we could certainly take a donation to the department, but it doesn't necessarily go, it's a little bit harder to make it for a specific purpose. This account now allows us to have a very specific purpose that we can say, if you would like to make a donation to the department, we have this fund that we use to help families with emergent needs, and that's what your donation would go to. And so hoping, therefore, in the longer run, that we start to offset those general funds that we're currently using for those emergent needs. Rebecca, is there anything I missed?
No, I think that's an accurate summary.
So thank you. Okay. So this was written by the department, and in this language from line 8 to line 17 in section 29, I think what you're letting us know is that this has not gone to a policy committee anywhere. Is that true?
Correct. Yes, this is the language that establishes it. It's pretty common to have revolving accounts established in HB2. It's not.
So my next several questions shouldn't be implied to be against the bill or anything. I just want to make sure I ask some process questions.
Sure.
Okay. So I have a bias in favor of policy committees reviewing new things, because I have seen many times, I've read something before committee hearings where I thought I understood exactly every issue, and somebody would come in to the hearing and they would point out a comma or they would point out a word, and it's something I didn't even see that needed to be changed or amended. And so without having eyes on this, I'm a little concerned that we're using a potentially faulty process. That's just commentary about process. On line 14, for example, where it says the funds may be comprised of public funds, gifts, grants, donations. The idea of using this for gifts, grants, and donations seems to be in line with the intent of this fund. But then when you insert the term public funds, what then distinguishes this account from any other account that we would use for or put general funds into?
So the reason that I wanted to, so it offers more transparency. It creates a revolving account that gets reported out annually. There's an annual report that has to be filed with revolving funds. It also allows us to segregate this as a separate fund. So it really is about more transparency and more control over this part of the program.
Yes, ma'am. I don't believe you answered my question, though.
Okay.
If we keep the term public funds on line 14, doesn't this become really another line of expense that we could put or line of revenue that would be open to having general funds put into it?
Yes. Yes, we are already using general funds for this purpose.
Okay, for this purpose, but not for this fund, because this fund doesn't exist.
Correct. Correct. So we would move the general funds that we already use for this purpose into this fund.
Could the fiscal committee do that if the words public funds were stricken from line 14?
Yes, because it also says, or any other source of funds.
Representative Wallner, your hand is up.
Yes, Karen, would we start to see in the budget a line where it would be labeled, I guess, emergency funds, we start to see that line in the budget where now we don't see it?
Correct. Correct. And that right now it's just within another class line of 2958. We would either put it in its own separate accounting unit or put it in its own class line in 2958.
And just to follow up, so it would possibly be the general funds that are showing up someplace else that we really don't know exactly what they're in there. So those would be there. And then if you did receive donations from organizations or individuals who wanted to be sure to help children in an emergency situation, those would go there. So the public would be able to see that those funds were going to that emergency fund and not just
Correct.
dumped into the regular budget.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And this account, it's established as a revolving account, so it would be non-lapse and continuously appropriated. So those donations that would be made to this fund could not be moved for any other purpose and would not be lapsed. They would be there until they were spent.
Thank you.
Representative Nordgren?
Thank you. I think bottom line is this is a transparency amount, so that the public has knowledge of where the money's come from and where it's gone. This is something we would be wise to include in House Bill 2.
Thank you for that. I'm generally thinking I'm agreeing with you, and now I'm down deep into the weeds. So let me say this back to you, Ms. Your hand is still up, Representative Waller. Do you have another question? Okay. So I just want to make sure I'm getting this clear. If we, on line 14, if we struck the term public funds from it, that would have the effect of taking it out of our normal 2-year budgeting process. We wouldn't be putting money into it on our 2-year budgeting process. But if for some reason there was money available that the department wanted to transfer general funds into this account, they would still have a mechanism for doing that by going to the Joint Fiscal Committee, and under the part of this that says that it can accept any other source of funds, the Joint Legislative Fiscal Committee would have the authority to move general funds into this new fund. Is that correct?
I don't think that removing public funds would keep it from being in the 2-year budget cycle. I think it's still, we have other revolving funds, some that have no general funds, we still put it in the 2-year budget cycle and budget funds in it. So I don't think it would restrict us from budgeting general funds in it either. I mean, I would defer to Kevin a little bit, but I don't think it would.
No, I agree with that. I think as long as it says any other source of funds, that could include funds or any other appropriation that the legislature decides to make.
But it would be you would see it as a separate class line or a separate accounting unit. So you would see if we were budgeting funds into this account. It wouldn't be.
Okay, so given that I like the general idea, why am I asking these kinds of questions? It's because every time we open up a revolving account, we're essentially obligating future legislatures, because once the money gets in there, future legislatures aren't going to reach into this revolving fund and pull money out. And so we're sort of inserting ourselves into this category of permanency that I don't think is appropriate for one legislature to bind another. So I'm just a little concerned about the impact of this. So I'd like to go ahead, Representative Nordgren.
No, I just want to clarify, this is setting up a process, a public process for money that would otherwise probably be hidden from everyone knowing what was coming and going. This is setting up a legitimate process.
Yes, ma'am, and I love that part of it. And if this only said gifts, grants, or donations, I'd already be ready to move on. It's the idea that we could put general funds money into this, and that it would have this sort of multi-biennium budget effect that is the thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around, because I don't think one legislature should bind the decisions of coming legislatures. But so Representative Murphy, you had your hand up, and then Representative Wallner will come to you.
I just have a quick question for Karen. How would we see general funds being allocated to a revolving fund? I just don't recall running into that in the budget process.
Sure, it would be either in its own accounting unit or in its own class line. And the revenue source is typically revolving funds at the bottom. So like the vaccine fund, I think, says revolving funds, if I remember correctly. There's a couple that have the revenue sources revolving funds.
Oh, okay. So the vaccines says, this is 5177, says funding revolving funds, and then it has general fund 0. So that would always show up, the general fund 0. We give you an indication that general funds could go into that account?
Right, but if there are not any budgeted, there's not any budgeted.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Wallner?
Sorry, I got sidetracked. I had somebody else ask me a question here in the house, so I got sidetracked. But Karen, we're already appropriating money for this purpose. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. We are, and so this was a project of mine to try to make it more transparent and track it better.
Okay, we just don't see it.
Correct.
So, okay.
It's about
Thank you.
$50,000 a year. It's not a significant amount of money, but it's just something that, given the type of expenditure, it's something that it's good to have good controls over.
Right. Thank you very much.
And so in your view, although the term public funds is redundant because we say any other source of funds, it would be your position that we should keep the phrase public funds in there.
I mean, I don't think it matters if you leave it or take it out, as long as it says any other source of funds.
Are there any other questions about section 29? We did bring it forward from tomorrow, but are there any other questions? Or on section 28? I'm not seeing any from the committee. So what I'm thinking we can do, and Mr. Ripple, if you've got a pencil to write some of this down, I think I'd like to have us entertain and debate a motion on having the committee accept sections 21, 23, and 29.
Okay.
In other words, I think we need to talk more today about the county reimbursement, section 24. And I think on section 25, we said we wanted to see Mr. Williams' language, and I personally want to go read the RSA section more closely. So I would like to entertain a motion, Mr. Vice Chair, on whether or not the committee approves the 4 sections I just listed. Would you read them back again, Mr. Ripple, those 4?
Yep, there's sections 21, 23, 28, and 29.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, you weren't in the previous conversation putting those off for another day. You wanted to make the motion now, is that correct?
We've gone over 6 sections. 4 of them, I think, it feels like we're ready to vote on. 2 of them we're deferring.
Okay, so I'd like to move that we support item number 23 in HB2, keeping it in HB2 as written. I'm sorry, I started with the wrong number, but going backwards. Same thing with number 21 in HB2. And the same thing with numbers 28 and 29 in HB2, which work together.
Okay, is there a second? Representative Wallner seconds. Is there any discussion on the motion? Which again is we're about to vote on whether or not we accept sections. Say them again, Mr. Ripple, because I don't want to screw it up. Sections 21,
21, 23, 28, and 29.
So is there any discussion on whether or not we accept these HB2 items? I'm not seeing any. So Mr. Clerk, are you ready to take a roll call vote on the motion?
All right,
Okay.
on the motion. If you're in favor, you'll say yes. If opposed, no. Representative Earth.
Yes.
Representative Weiler votes yes. Representative Bean.
Yes.
Representative Wallner.
Sorry, yes.
Okay.
Representative Nordgren.
yes,
Representative Rogers.
yes,
Representative Edwards.
Yes.
Vote is 7-0.
Thank you. So we want to take a break at 12:15, so we still have plenty of time. Let's improvise a little bit and drop down to section 106, please. Can you do that on your screen, Mr. Ripple?
Or
What page you're on? You're on page 51.
46.
Yeah, I was looking at the PDF number. Okay, so these are 3 HB2 line items from the Veterans Home. These sound like they've all been in previous HB2s, in that these in combination with one another give the commandant flexibility to use personnel money and personnel slots to do what she needs to do to get people there at the bedside, whether it's via contracts or per diems or whatever. So, because we're sort of accelerating this, and these are not on the schedule, I did want to just introduce them and have us take a look at it. And for you more experienced people, you've probably seen this language before. So Mr. Ripple, can you confirm, I'm putting you on the spot, but can you confirm that these 3 sections have been in previous HB2s as written?
I'm not sure that the Veterans Home has had section 106 before, the unfunded positions. They have had 107. Sorry, I just lost it. The transfer among accounts and classes. I would just comment here that they also have sections 108 through 110, which are duplicative of language elsewhere, either in House Bill 1 or in section 106. And what I mean by that is, you go down to section 109, you can see on line 8, it refers to a waiver from RSA 917A limitations. If you go back up to section 107, that can be found on line 34. Like section 110 refers to a waiver from RSA 917C. That can be found on line 35. So I think if you were to accept section 107 in its entirety, you could remove sections 109 and 110 from the bill. And also, section 108 here on line 1, per diem payments. This reads the same as the class note that is in House Bill 1 that the Veterans Home talked about the other day. So I think you could remove that as well.
Or we could remove the class note.
Yep, either way.
So as the new guy, I think I'd rather remove the class notes because HB2 is more visible to the public, and therefore we would have a more transparent policy if it was an HB2 and removed from the class notes. Is that correct or wrong?
Well, I'm not sure which is more transparent. They both have the force of law, so either one would work.
But for transparency, where the public can readily look at it and know what we're doing, which one is more transparent to the public?
Well, I'm not sure which bill the public is more likely to look at. So I don't really know the answer to that.
Representative Wallner, you had your hand up, and then Representative Weiler.
I wondered how we ended up in a situation where it was in both documents. There must have been a reason for it at the time, the reason why it was in both documents. Do you know, Kevin?
I don't know.
You have a follow-up?
Well, I remember seeing this when we were going through the Veterans Home earlier this week, or maybe it was last week, but anyway, when we were going through the Veterans Home, I remember seeing this on their line, and I thought that's sort of interesting because it's really sort of helpful because it pertained to that line in the budget, and it was kind of helpful to see it right there. If I didn't know to go looking in if it wasn't there and I didn't know to go looking in House Bill 2, I probably wouldn't have ever known it was in House Bill 2. So it seems like there's some benefit to having it in House Bill 1. I'm open to hearing other thoughts about it, and I didn't know whether the commandant maybe had a preference.
So I'm open to learning from you. So what I think I just took away from your comment, Representative Wallner, is that you don't think it really should be in both places. And if we were to choose one place, you would want it in the organizational notes.
Yes, I think so.
Representative Weiler, do you have a question, sir, or comment?
I was going to say the same thing that Representative Walner just said. If you're talking about transparency and someone's looking up a budget, they'd look up, Veterans Home. They wouldn't even imagine it being in HB2. So if you're looking up something about the Veterans Home, you go to the budget first, and then you see the line note, and that's far more transparent than, as she said, you wouldn't normally go looking in HB2.
Representative Wallner, your hand is still up or is up?
Sorry about that. Just
all right. So does the Veterans Home send a legislative liaison? Do they have anyone actually sitting in to hear us and to take comments?
I suspect they don't, and I see no hands raised in the audience.
So I would like to add discussion and decisions around 106 to, what was the last one you said, 110?
110, yes.
I would like to add those to our agenda for Friday. And if we could get an email to the commandant to let her know that we want some more input on this, and that we're thinking about removing redundancy in a couple of different ways, removing one section that's referring to another section of HB2, and then removing some HB2 language that's already in an organizational note. So I think we could just clean up this area and maybe they wouldn't lose anything. 106 though is a new concept is what I'm also hearing. So Representative Erf, do you have a comment?
Just a quick question for Kevin. What page number is that in the PDF where the class note is? Is it 1189, 1188? Those are the two that I see class notes on.
Those would be the two. The only two class notes, I don't have the document up in front of me, but those are the only two class notes that they have. And I believe they read the same for both accounting units.
Okay. And what is that one tied to back in HP2? Which number in HP2?
The section number?
Yes.
Section 108.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Weiler, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, sir. You can defer if you want more time, but as you read section 106, lines 21 through 24, how do you react to that, sir?
Similar to what we've done with HHS, if, and it allows you some flexibility if you have someone leave and you have positions you got to fill, then you would be able to do that, as long as you don't exceed your budget.
So I'm interpreting that to mean you have no reason to
problem
oppose.
with it. I have no problem
You have
with
no
accepting.
Okay. So let's see if we can get it off the plate. I'd entertain. Are there any 107 needs to be resolved with 108? I believe you said, Mr. Ripple.
107 isn't in conflict with 108, but it includes some language that's also included in 109.
Consider that redundancy conflict just because it's
Okay.
in two places. I think that we should just defer all 5 of these, 106 to 110, for consideration on Friday. And I don't think anyone has a problem with 106, but in terms of redundancy, I think we just, for the good of the state, may want to clean that up. All right. Does anyone disagree with that approach?
No.
All right.
No disagreement.
Okay. So, Mr. Ripple, are you ready to give us another bite at the apple, a tutorial on the uses of lapses in our final product that's due on the 24th, the uses of lapses and kind of the history of how lapses get used as part of the budgeting process?
Sure, I can give you a brief history. I think as far as what Division 3 has to produce by the 24th, you don't necessarily have to be concerned with the lapse because we won't identify a department-specific lapse number. We'll only identify a statewide lapse number on our surplus statement. And I can go down and find that in our surplus statement for the current biennium in just a moment. But as far as the lapse is concerned, budgeting for a lapse really goes back to 1980s. I think prior to that, the state didn't do it. And I think to provide some historical perspective, frankly, the way it came about was the legislature needed to find a way to balance its budget in one of those sessions in the 80s. And somebody came up with the idea to say, well, hey, state agencies don't spend every dime of their appropriation. Let's assume that agencies will lapse 10 million, 20 million, whatever of the amount that they've given them. And that allows us to balance the budget. And so for that reason, every budget since has included a statewide general fund lapse figure. The percentage of that lapse amount varies. It's been between 2%, 4% of general fund expenditures. And it can be raised and lowered throughout the process. As I said, it is a statewide figure, so you don't assume an HHS specific lapse, but generally speaking, the governor's office will assign a lapse target to each agency and expect each agencies to manage to that figure throughout the year. And really the only other thing I would add is that the lapse requirement, though contained on our surplus statement, is not contained anywhere in state law. So there's an expectation that agencies will manage to the lapse, but there's no legal requirement that they do so. So HHS, for example, could theoretically spend every dime of its appropriation, but in practice, that just doesn't happen. So let me pull up our surplus statement here just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Take me just one moment. Okay, so I'm about to share our surplus statement for the 2021 biennium. And you'll see here on lines 9 and 10, budget appropriations and appropriation adjustments. So that line 9, budget appropriations, is everything you would find in House Bill 1. Line 10, appropriation adjustments, is any spending that you would find either in the trailer bill or any other bills that the legislature has passed for that year. And then on line 11, you'll see less general fund lapse estimate. So for fiscal 20, for example, we assume that the general fund lapse would be 56.7 million. And then in 21, that it would be 75.4 million. In reality, the actual figure is going to be much higher than that. I think the governor's surplus statement assumes a lapse of $150.5 million in fiscal 21. But down here on line 12, total appropriations, you'll see that's simply the net of everything that's been appropriated, either in the operating budget or other bills, minus that statewide lapse estimate for the year. And that's how we arrive at net appropriations. So I think that's a really quick overview. I don't know if you have any questions about that.
Well, that helps me a great deal. And what was really valuable was that I don't have to worry about it. So
that's true. Division 3 does not have to assume any lapse.
Yeah. So thank you for not burying the lead and using that as one of your thesis statements. I appreciate it. So Representative Erf, you had your hand up momentarily? Okay.
I'm good.
Okay. Do any of our other committee members want to just comment in general about what Mr. Ripple just said? Some of you have seen this a couple of times. I'm not really seeing any. Well, thank you.
Welcome.
I think we're ready to have you share the portion of the governor's budget related to Medicaid.
Okay.
And then Representative Erf, in background, will you take a look at the working document you put together so that we can ask some questions and compare numbers?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Now, there are Medicaid funds throughout the HHS budget. I wasn't sure what account specifically you wanted to look at, so I just pulled up the biggest one, 7948 Medicaid Care Management.
This is the money. I'm just verifying. This is the money that that we match with the feds, and this is what funds our contracts with the managed care organizations to provide actual hands-on care to patients.
That's correct.
So, so my working assumption is that we need to fully fund the general fund's obligations to fully receive the federal funds. That's my working theory. So what number are we looking at here for the total general funds to fund this? Is it the 7.5? No, it's the 397 number. No,
it's the 189 and 207 number.
Now, Representative Earth, in your, okay, Representative Waller, you have a question?
Kevin, I'm just wondering, what page is it in? What page is it on?
Well,
What
you know,
document are you using?
I see now that I'm looking up House Bill 1 rather than the governor's recommended. So let me just go back and pull up it's the same accounting unit and the same numbers, of course, but you aren't able to see the comparison with 2021. So
Right.
pull that up. And account 7948.
Okay.
Account 7948 on page 993.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
And there. I'll just highlight the general fund totals for everybody to see.
Thank you. So FY22 feels to me to be about an 8% increase over FY21. Do we know why the governor recommended that exact number? Because it's all the way down to the last dollar. It's exactly, you know, $189,220,908 or 909. So that's a very precise number, and that implies some very precise assumptions. And so is Ms. Rounds on? Do you want to tell us about what you can about that 189 number?
Sure.
And the governor.
So as far as the preciseness of it, I would just speak briefly that Athena Gagnon is the Medicaid Finance Director who works for me and works directly with Medicaid. She has been doing Medicaid finance for, I don't know, 20-ish years, I would guess at least. Kevin knows her well. So she is very precise with her budgeting. So in addition to funding the managed care organization contracts in this budget, it also is the fee for service, as well as some other smaller expenditures. So what I would do to explain the changes here is to start at line 101. And what you're seeing is a decrease from fiscal year 22 to from fiscal year 21 of 731 million to 706 million. And the largest change here is the establishment of the CHIP account and balancing what is in this accounting unit versus what is in the CHIP accounting unit. In 1819, CHIP was within this accounting unit, was within 7948. In 2021, we created the CHIP account. And so in 22-23, we're trying to balance what should be here and what should be in the CHIP account. We actually have a fiscal item that you'll see not on this week's fiscal committee agenda, but the next fiscal committee agenda, moving funds from 7948 to the CHIP account. So that is the change in 101. Lines 535 and 563 are transferred from the DCYF budget. They were previously in 2958. If you remember during the presentations, both in DCYF and in Medicaid, we talked about how we're trying to put all of the Medicaid expenditures into the Medicaid budget for contracted Medicaid expenditures or fee for service. And so that represents that change. And then when we go down to the overall source of funds here, so there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to the source of funds. The agency income, the private local funds on 005 are related to the Medicaid enhancement tax. So that can vary based on that. The general federal mix here in fiscal year 22 is different than 23, not only because of the, the METS is staying the same there, The difference there is the federal funds, and the reason for that is during the governor's budget, we adjusted the federal funds because it has been told to governors by the federal government that the public health emergency is likely to continue through December. So we made an adjustment to the federal funds in fiscal year 22 to reflect an additional earn of federal due to that enhanced FMAP. That was a lot of words, so I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions.
There's a lot there. So Representative Wallner, you had your hand up and you've taken it down. Was your question answered? You're on mute. Okay.
Yes, I'm fine. Fine.
Representative Weiler.
I noticed the difference in federal funds, general funds from 22 to 23. The general funds went up, but the federal funds went down. And then I heard her talk about advanced FMAP. That might be the explanation for why we seem to be going up while they go down. So that I guess that answered that question. Is that correct, Ms. Brown?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Browns, do you think your explanation would be significantly enhanced if we got Ms. Gagnon in here this afternoon?
So I would say the piece that that Athena could provide that I don't know as well is all of the expenditures that make up 101. She could tell you why that number is so precise. That would be what she could probably add for you.
Representative Irf, you have a question?
I do. Can you explain why the 005 private local funds, the Met, why is that budget much lower than actual in 20 and somewhat lower than this year's adjusted authorized?
That is because the Medicaid enhancement tax is based on the previous year. And so fiscal year 22 would be based on calendar year 21. And the hospitals are anticipated to have less revenue in fiscal year 21 than what was, in calendar year 21 than what was previously budgeted for fiscal year 20 and 21. Because the Medicaid enhancement tax is based on net patient service revenue.
Oh, okay. All right. Not relevant. Okay.
You have a follow-up, Representative Irf?
No.
You're not moving. Oh, there you go.
Sorry, no, I thought you were hearing me. My bad.
So I have a question for you, Representative Irf.
Yes, sir.
In the worksheet that you've worked so hard on, for the general funds under 7948, the governor's recommended is 189,229. What number are you carrying in your worksheet that's comparable to that number?
So the number that's currently there is the FY21 adjusted authorized, which is about $172 million. And to get up to the governor's numbers requires about $16.7 million in FY22 and about $34.5 million in FY23 to get to the that takes you to the $207 million he has budgeted there.
That's good information, but it's not the answer to my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Let me try it again. So in this particular cell of FY22 governor's recommended, you have a comparable cell on your worksheet that used the FY21 base and then projected a working number. I'm asking you what your working number was that's comparable to the FY22 governor's budget. What number is?
It is the FY21 adjusted authorized. I did not make up numbers in between. I either picked from the FY22 governor budget for a particular account, or I picked from the FY21 adjusted authorized for an account. In some cases, after I picked one or the other, if the other one had lower lines, I might have drawn a couple of those over, but that was very rare.
Okay, so right now, the the working number that your work document reflects is the 172 number. And it seems like we have a strong argument to bring it up to fully fund the governor's request, 189, 229, and then in FY23, the 207, 132. If we were to do that, what's that total? The
So-
additional amount?
So in year one, it's 16.6 or 16.7 roughly. In year two, it's 34.5. If you add those together, you get around what, $51 million over the 2-year biennium difference.
So
That's
just
just-
to put that 51 million in context, we had assumed, I believe, that we had about $100 million that we could add back from your working document, and this is about 51 million. So this is a big bill. So, but it seems like it's an appropriate bill. I think we need to seriously consider accepting the governor's recommended FY22 and 23 numbers for 7948. Is there any discussion amongst the committee members on that point? Representative Wallner?
Well, I just want to be sure that what we're doing here is correct. I haven't even actually, to tell you the truth, and I haven't even found it in in Representative Irf's document. So I mean, it's hard to find things in it, and so I'd like to have a minute to look at where is it exactly.
Unfortunately,
Representative Irf.
Wallner, you're right. The document that you're looking at, that I've been looking at, is out of order from the PDF
Yeah.
document. It's roughly a quarter of the way through. It's in the division Medicaid services title, which is I think is included in that document. I'm not looking at it right now. What's the second column over from the left?
Well, one thing about it is it's got 80 pages, this document, so it does have page numbers. So if we could at least get to the page numbers, I think it would be, I think I just got to the page number. I think as we talk about this, I think if we can at least get to the correct page numbers, I don't see how anyone's ever going to be able to follow what we're doing here.
You're
If
right.
we can't even.
Let me get there so I can do that with you. I apologize for not being ready.
So I would like to take the tutorial on Representative Irf's worksheet offline, because I do think that we have on this particular line item the clarity that is really important, which is that if we accept the governor's recommended budget for 22 and 23 in account 7948, then that is going to require us to apply approximately 51 million of the approximately 100 million that Representative Irf identified in his process. So we just spent half of the funds that we have available for add backs if we were to accept fully funding 7948. Representative Weiler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This page, isn't it a summation of several earlier pages and earlier AUs that are included in these figures? Is that true, Mr. Ripple?
These represent one accounting unit only, 7948 Medicaid Care Management. It does not reflect the other accounts in the Division of Medicaid.
Can I
Thank you.
just interrupt I'm sorry.
So Representative Weiler, I think that answers your question, but just to restate what I'm assuming we're looking at is we're looking at the money that becomes available for contracts to our managed care organizations. Is that right, Mr. Ripple?
That's correct.
So Representative Nordgren, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I have a problem with offline discussions. I think all of us probably have the same concerns that Representative Wallner has, so I'm not sure what an offline discussion with her might help the rest of us. Just
I'm
a
gonna- I hear you.
Could I interject,
accept-
Mr. Chairman?
Wait a second. So Representative Nordgren, I accept your premise, and I will schedule a chance for Representative Erf to walk through his working document. So Representative Erf, tomorrow morning, would you be prepared, please, to give us a tutorial on the uses and limitations of your working document? I think it's important to keep note of what it is not. It is not our proposal. It's just a baseline for us to reference as we add back money to these lines.
The short answer is yes, but let me just expound a little bit. I was just not prepared to give page numbers. I can do it now, see, at the same time.
I do not want to do that
Well, that would just
now.
help them see the numbers. It's very easy just to tell them.
I do not want to do that now. I want to stay on the agenda and stay talking about the 5 major funds that we have to discuss. We're now talking about one of them. We're talking about Medicaid. I want to make sure that we leave time to talk about CHIP. I want to talk about TANF. I want to talk about MMIS.
Can I just tell them what page to look at?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman? So it's the bottom of page 19 and the top of page 20.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you. I don't have a copy of that 80-page document, and I'm not planning to spend my printer ink on it. So it's a little difficult to try to figure it out when we don't have availability of it, but we could, I guess we'll put it up on our computers and hopefully we'll figure it out.
Could not Representative, could Kevin put it up? I can give him page numbers as we go.
Yep, I can put it up on my screen here.
Going to rely on hope. We're going to rely on making sure, again, that this document is available to you. We talked this morning about how it's going to be hung on our public website once it's properly watermarked. And tomorrow morning, Representative Erf is going to give us a tutorial on how to use this. So it's right there on the website.
And there's the account there at the bottom of page 19 and the top of page 20.
So Representative Nordgren, your hand is up.
It's down, thank you.
All right, so let's go back to the page you were sharing, Mr. Ripple, on the governor's budget.
Yes, let me just find where I there we are.
Okay, so, all right. So what hopefully we're taking from this discussion is that line 7948, we probably ought to, as a division, agree to fully fund the governor's recommended budget. And if we do that, that will absorb about 50% of the flexibility we have on adding funds back to line items. So we will be talking about that in future meetings, but I think that's, I want to put a stake in the ground here for us to talk about. Can we go to CHIP now? Can you do the same thing for CHIP?
Yes, and this is easy because it's the next accounting unit.
So, excuse me. So I see the general funds going up from essentially 24 million to essentially 38. So that's about just under 14 million in 22. And that it barely goes up in 23. So Ms. Rounds, if you want to come in and tell us things like why it goes up so little in 23 and goes up so much in 22, that would be great.
Sure. So as I mentioned with the standard Medicaid account with 7948, this is the first time or the second biennium that the CHIP accounting unit has existed. And the first biennium that I would say that we're trying to actually level set this accounting unit where we anticipate it will be. And we do, as I mentioned, have a fiscal committee item going for the April agenda to transfer funds from 7948 to this accounting unit 7051, which would then change the adjusted authorized on fiscal year 21. This is what is being reflected as some of the reduction in class line 101. When we looked at 7948, there was a reduction from 21 to 22 in the total expenditure, and that is essentially being moved to here. The fund mix is a little different in fiscal year 20 because of the enhanced FMAP, and the case will also be the same in fiscal year 22. However, on this account, we have not made an adjustment for fiscal year, for fiscal year 21, we'll also have some enhanced FMAP. We have not made an adjustment for fiscal year 22 in this accounting unit because we are still trying to process, if you will, the most recent bill that passed at the federal level. And it seems like the enhanced FMAP might not apply to CHIP anymore. And we're trying to understand and process that completely. So we did not make any changes to fiscal year 22 regarding an enhanced FMAP.
So the summary of that is that if you were to make adjustments based on some of the things you're thinking about, would that increase the 37 million request, do you think, or would it decrease the 37 million request?
So if the enhanced FMAP does apply to the CHIP kids, it would decrease the general funds. The other thing I should have mentioned on the standard Medicaid account, and of course applies to anywhere that we're making a Medicaid payment, is the 3.1% rate increase that happened 1/1 of 21. So anywhere in fiscal year 21 would only represent half a year of that rate increase.
Okay, I think you may have said it different than I was expecting to hear it. I think what you were saying is that in FY22 for the 37.7 million, you assumed the enhanced FMAP, and that if we don't get the enhanced FMAP, then we have to come back and adjust this number. If we have less enhanced FMAP, it seems to me like the general fund amount would have to go up.
I'm sorry, no, we did not include any enhanced FMAP in 22 or 23 in this accounting unit because we're not sure if it will change. So if we do end up getting the enhanced FMAP, we would need less general funds here, but we don't have clarity yet as to whether we will.
Appreciate that. Representative Weiler, do you have a question, sir?
Yes, I'm curious as to why we go up more than 50% from 21 to 22.
So fiscal year 20 and 21 was the first biennium that we had this accounting unit. And so we weren't entirely sure at what level to budget it. So fiscal year 21 is under budget. It's not enough money, and we have a fiscal committee item to adjust that to be higher.
Follow up.
Yes, sir.
I thought we'd had CHIPS, this children's health insurance program for decade.
We did, and it used to be that these expenditures were just part of 7948. If you remember the single audit from 2018, there was a finding on the department about our Medicaid revenues not being transparent enough. And so we created several accounting units, including this one, to break out what was in 7948.
Thank you.
So to visualize the answer to Representative Weiler, can we scroll back up, Mr. Ripple, to Medicaid, where we see FY22 dropping to the 706 number or whatever? I think it's a little further up.
Class line 101.
So I think on line 101, Representative Weiler, you'll see that in 20 and 21, it was basically higher than it's going to be in 22 on this line item. And that's because in part CHIP got moved and money came out of this and got added to the CHIP line. Is that right, Ms. Rounds?
Yes.
Doesn't look like the same amount.
It wouldn't be because of that 3.1% rate increase. That's going to affect it as well.
Follow up, sir?
Thank you.
Let's go back to the CHIP line where we were, please. Okay. So, Ms. Rounds, I'm so sorry. Let's just for people out in the audience and for me as well. Tell me again exactly who is eligible for the CHIP program and how that's used to purchase direct health care.
So I'm just looking through the attendees to see if Henry was on or I can't answer that and not.
Okay. Nope.
But
I don't want to.
It's children and they are part these payments would also go to the MCOs. It's all part of the MCO contract.
Okay, I thought this might be part of a fee-for-service section of what we spend money on because it's more of an insurance product.
No, they are part of the MCOs.
Okay.
A different eligibility group, if you will.
Okay. So, thank you. So what I'm thinking is, as we look at line 7051, we probably are wanting to fully fund the governor's recommended budget because I think this is money that ends up setting up direct health care. And to me, that's a priority. So, and I'm now, can you keep that highlighted, Mr. Ripple? Because I lose sight of it. It looks like that's going to absorb about 27 to 28 million of the funds that we have available for add back. Do you agree with that, Representative Irf? If we add to your work document FY22 general funds for 7051 and 23, that takes another 27, 28 million, doesn't it?
Correct, and that's on page 18 of the PDF.
If we take 50 and 28, we're now at 78 million of the approximately 100 million that we have overall. That right now, based on the Ways and Means estimate, that we can add back. So we're down to about 22 million or so. In this one, we give ourselves a little bit of a problem in that we're expecting those revenue flows to come in greater in 23 than 22, and we're using the same number in both years. I think we were trying to keep a 1/3, 2/3 rule, but this would violate that. Representative Nordgren, do you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is probably not the right place to ask it, but you did mention the Ways and Means Committee, and I was just wondering what the status was of the conversations that Representative Weiler has been having with Representative Major in Ways and Means. Are they planning to revisit their numbers?
The short answer to that is yes, and I'll let Representative Weiler provide a longer answer if he cares to. But at this point in this exercise, we have not been told anything other than the Ways and Means estimate that the House voted on, that we're still using that for our planning. So if we are lucky enough for Ways and Means to come back and give us more money, this exercise we're going through right now is still useful and relevant. So Representative Weiler, do you want to talk about where you're at with Ways and Means, sir?
Probably Friday before we hear anything.
That's really soon. I didn't think we'd hear until Tuesday, the 23rd. So I like a Friday answer better.
Well, I'm not sure that was a kind of a preliminary thing. We'll hope to hear something.
Did Representative Wallner?
Yes, so when I was looking at Representative Erf's documents, it looked like he had reduced the governor's budget by 159 million.
No. He didn't reduce anything.
Well, it's 159 million less than the governor's budget.
The governor's budget is 159 million more than the FY21 adjusted base. And he uses a different revenue estimation process. And so he had greater amounts of revenues to use in his separate, distinguishable, independent effort. We are using the New Hampshire House process of taking a look at our current budget, taking a look at the Ways and Means estimates, and determining how much that Ways and Means estimate, how much money that gives us to enhance the FY21 base. We're using different techniques than the governor because he has more flexibility on revenue estimates than we do.
Okay, I understand that part, but I'm just trying to figure out. So you're saying to your base, you're adding back 100 million. That's your goal?
Yes, ma'am. I think the Ways and Means
I'm just trying
estimate.
to reach where you're going. So that means it's about 59 million that is reduced.
No.
If you add back 100.
No, that 59 million is an irrelevant, useless number to us. We have a process where we must use the Ways and Means revenue estimate. The Ways and Means revenue estimate gives us a delta between the Ways and Means estimate as voted on by the New Hampshire House, between that revenue estimate and the monies being spent in the FY21 budget. What we are doing is we're using our own independent process to build from an FY21 base to allocate the funds that are available as a result of the Ways and Means revenue estimate. It's parallel, but it's completely separate from the governor's process. Yes, ma'am, Representative Wallner.
Well, I'm just trying to get a simple number I'm just trying to get to a point where I understand how much either you're adding back, and it looked like you were 159 million under the governor's budget.
The governor estimated 159 million over the FY21 base.
Okay.
That's what that 159 represents.
And from your base, you're trying to add back 100 million.
I'm trying to stay within the Ways and Means revenue estimate,
Okay.
and that allows us 100 million at this point.
Right, okay, we're on the same track.
And every
So-
single one of us wants the Ways and Means estimate on Friday to be greater so that there's more than 100 million.
Okay, so there's 59 million as of today, using the Ways and Means estimates, doing the 100. There's 59 million that's still out there that the governor's budget is higher than if we did add back the 100?
I would say it differently, as you wouldn't be surprised. I would say that the revenue estimation techniques used by others and not us, the governor's revenue estimation technique and the Ways and Means revenue estimation technique, disagree with each other and to the tune of about $59 million. And
Thank you.
and that we have no control over that. We are downstream
Right.
from the people who do the revenue estimate. And so
Right.
we can only spend what we've got. And what we've got is about 100 million over the FY21 base. And
Right.
yeah, so
I think we're on the same, I think we're at the same place. So if, just as an example, Ways and Means came in on Friday and had an additional $10 million.
Yeah.
Then we would be back, we'd be down to a $49 million.
again, the 49 million would be irrelevant. We would have an additional 10 million to put onto the FY21 base.
Okay, thank you.
So you'll note that I'm fastidiously avoiding the term cut because we're not cutting anything. We are adding, we're using our legislatively approved process to add money back. We're not cutting anything. So that's my position. I'm sticking to it. So Representative Wallner, do you want?
No, that's fine. I just think it's sometimes amusing. Okay, thank you.
I try sometimes to be amusing. I hope we're in sync. Okay. So where were we? When we last looked at CHIP, if we went with the governor's numbers, we would have consumed about 78 million of the 100 million that Ways and Means said we had. So we got another 22 million that we could potentially add back on other lines. Are there any comments or questions about where we are? Because I think we're about to go look at TANF next. Okay, so I would like us all to be thinking through the possibility that Division 3's recommendation for line 7051 is to accept the governor's budget. Representative Wallner, your hand is up. Do you have another question?
Yes, I do. I wondered if Karen was still on. I mean, I know that there is Medicaid in a number of other spots in this budget. And how does accepting some lines without other lines affect all of that? Have we hit all of the Medicaid lines in the budget?
So the other large Medicaid provider type payments are in developmental disabilities and long-term supports and services. And well, actually it's all in long-term supports and services. It's long-term care, which is mostly a county match. And then the developmental disabilities accounts.
So let's react here on the fly. Ms. Ripple, if you would just think about how you would get us to the development disabilities line. Representative Wallner, your hand is still up. Is that a follow-up?
No, I just wanted to, I just want to be sure we've seen all of the Medicaid lines.
I think that's a great question, and I share your concern, and I appreciate Ms. Round's answer. And I will adapt to it. Representative Weiler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask Ms. Rounds, on the A&M report, they pointed out how the HHS was not achieving the maximum amount of Medicaid because of the way you filed. Has there been any changes in the way you file, and are they reflected in the 22-23 budget?
I'm not sure if I know exactly which finding you're referring to. There is a finding about 4E that we're not claiming enough 4E. That is not fully reflected in the budget because we have not been able to implement all of the changes that need to happen to do that. There was also some discussion about, I think, the Medicaid reports that we file and having some technology difficulties related to MMIS. And again, the funds to upgrade MMIS are in the capital budget. So that would probably likely be reflected in 24, 25.
Thank you. Is there a plan to adopt some of their recommendations?
Yes, yes. And I know that the HB2 part of that is coming up on Friday, and I will have folks from A&M available to speak to their findings as well. But we are planning on implementing, I believe, almost all of them and really all of them in time. There's a couple that we can't take on simultaneously, so it will come later in the process, hopefully. But there's 4, 5, 6 that we're starting work on right now.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Let's, if you're ready to take us to the activity code for the developmentally disabled.
Yeah, Karen, do you have that accounting unit off the top of your head? Because I can't find it.
I wish I did.
Okay.
I'm half
Let's
expecting
take a 5-minute bio break here, and we'll come back and we'll go to developmentally disabled, and then we'll go to long-term care supports, and then we'll try to hit TANF. And when it hits 12:15, we'll go to lunch.
Kevin, if you have the Appendix A, that's probably the easiest thing to work from.
Okay.
Do you want me to resend it over to you?
If you don't mind.
No, I don't mind. Oops. There you go. And that is a little easier because it has all the page numbers. It is. It's agency 93. So long-term supports and services is 2 different agencies. So it starts on page 1132.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just going to, for a minute.
When you find it, Kevin, could you just let me know the account number?
Yep, sure.
Because I couldn't find it either.
So it's account 7100.
Professional care.
Should be called developmental services.
Oh, wrong one.
It's odd because I thought I searched on that and couldn't find it.
Okay, got it. You happen to know what the other one is going to be, the long-term care one you mentioned?
I'm not sure what that one will be.
Okay, we'll get there.
I know that. So later we'll be looking at TANF, and I know that's 6146.
The 10, if I can find it, I can search for it.
All right, okay.
It's when they make up these names that aren't in the spreadsheet, I can't find them.
Right.
And just so you know, it's page 10 has the, oh no, that's not it either. 700. I still gotta find out. There's too many 7100s.
Yes, I know.
Think we're adding back too much?
I think that's kind of what he's trying to show. Page 64, if we get to that point.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm personally ready to get going again. Mr. Ripple, Ms. Rounds, are you two ready?
I'm here. I think Karen was just taking a quick break. She'll be right back.
Let's wait for her. It's not that she couldn't catch up quickly. I just want to give her a chance. You want to go ahead and share your document then, though, on the
Sure.
PD? Hey, Keith,
Yes, sir.
on your worksheet, would you just tell me which of the numbers you put into your worksheet? Did you put in the 164.5 number from the adjusted authorized, or did you put in the governor's 160.1?
I put in the 160.1 in both years. Since that's a lower number than the 164. And I just, at this point, 23 was the same as 22. So the only difference here, in other words, would be the 15 million in 23. Does that make sense?
Nope, it does.
Okay.
Do we
An
have,
enhanced F-map for that 23.
I don't think there would be enhanced FMAP in 23. And if I heard Ms. Rounds right, we're not assuming any enhanced FMAP in 22, even though we may get it, and it might look like a windfall when it happens. She didn't use the term windfall, though.
She did assume it in the really large Medicaid account, because that one they are allowing.
She's back now. Hi, Ms. Rounds.
Hello.
Well, I think Representative Weiler just wants to sync up with you on enhanced FMAP and how it affects the planning assumptions for 22 and 23.
Okay. So the only accounting unit that we made an adjustment for the enhanced FMAP for 22 only was 7948. We are hearing that the enhanced FMAP is likely to go through until December 31st. It is dependent on when the public health emergency ends at the federal level. So we have received indications that it will continue through the end of the calendar year. So we made the adjustment in 7948. We have not made it anywhere else, including this accounting unit.
So if we get, okay, I just want to make sure, again, I'm understanding what you're telling us. I think what we're saying is that for line 7100, the 160.1 million that's in FY22 assumes a traditional match. It does not assume the enhanced FMAP.
That's
But
correct.
that if we get the enhanced FMAP, it would look, and I'm going to use the word windfall. A lot of budget people don't like the term, but I think it's going to be surplus money that we didn't count on, and therefore it looks like a windfall. And it's also possible that we're going to get more guidance from the feds between now and, say, the committee at conference. And so before the final budget gets locked in, maybe we'll have a different, better grounded estimate for this account.
Yes, we would definitely try to make any adjustments we can before committee at conference based on the guidance at that time.
But so for now, we're assuming no enhanced FMAP.
Correct.
Okay, so for the developmentally disabled services, I would like on line 7100, I would like us to discuss the idea that we should accept the governor's recommended budget. And to get to that conversation, why don't we start out, Mr. Ripple or Ms. Rounds, either of you, on explaining the difference between the FY21 164.5 and the 160.1, because it goes down in the first year of the governor's budget.
Sure, I can do that. This accounting unit was established to be a revolving account in fiscal year 2021. This, to the discussion earlier with Representative Erf, doesn't show revolving funds because it is funded with the general fund and with the federal match. Because of it now being a revolving account, the fiscal year 22 budget has been requested, assuming that we will have about a $38 million carry forward in total funds from 21 into 22. So the reality is that budget is actually, what would be available in fiscal year 21 is more like 350 million. And of course, it is anticipated that some of those funds would not get used in 22 and would carry forward to 23. So that is why you're seeing a reduction there. It's not actually a reduction in what's available to be spent, but it is a reduction in what is being requested for general funds in 22.
So do you know if the department I mean, obviously they work for the governor, but does the department agree on the three lines that we've discussed so far with the governor's budget number?
So our request was a little bit higher than the governor's request, than the governor's budget, I'm sorry. But we believe that the governor's budget will work.
So are there questions or comments about the 7100 line? I think if we were to accept the governor's budget, what that would mean in terms of our ability to use the Ways and Means estimate, that would mean that FY22 is what the work document assumes. FY23 would add 15 million. So if you take the 78 plus the 15, we're now at about 93 million of the 100 that we have available to add back into the FY21 base. So we're at 93 million at this point, I think. Are there any questions? I happen to think that this is a line that we would like to fully fund. I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's go to the long-term care support line.
Before we do that, there are actually two other accounting units associated with that are also associated with developmental services, which is acquired brain disorder, which is 7016, and the children's IHS waiver, which is 7110. These are also revolving accounts.
Yeah, so these, the governor's budget represents a decrease in what's in FY '21, but because it's a revolving account, you think you have the resources to do what's needed for 70-16 over the coming 2 years. Is that true?
Correct. So that's why you see a decrease in general funds from fiscal year 21 in both years. But I believe from what I've been explained of representative or spreadsheet, it may be that the 22 total appropriation would be represented in both 22 and 23.
His working document in this case, I believe, assumes the governor's budget numbers. Could you confirm that, Representative Irf? Yes?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, so we could on 70-16 accept the governor's budget, and it would not have an impact on the amount of money we have available for add backs.
No, it actually would increase because in the second year, it's 14 million in the governor's budget, so that would be $3 million higher than the 11.
Oh, okay, so there's a $2.6 million bill here. Is that right? I can't do mental math very well.
Well, I was saying 3, but 2.6 is probably right. Yes, it's in that range.
So let's go ahead and keep it 3, just to keep it simple. So
Yep.
If we were at 93, we're now at about 96. So let's go to the third of the DD funds. So this looks like, from your work document, the only effect of accepting the governor's budget is that the 4.4 in FY '23 represents about a $700,000 increase from your work document.
Correct.
So we were at 96, let's say we're at 97 out of 100. So is there any discussion around accepting or modifying the governor's proposal on this line item? We talked about, this is 7110. We talked about 7100, 7016. So far, all 3 of them, the working conversation is around accepting the governor's budget proposal on these lines. Does any of the committee want to discuss that? All right. Now let's go to long-term care supports.
So what account specifically, I'm sorry, what account do you mean by long-term supports?
Probably
Ms. Reynolds.
2152.
Okay, to get to the county cap. Here we go.
County cap discussion? It is.
Yes.
I want to postpone that to this afternoon anyways. Is there, what else do we have for long-term?
That's it. That's everything else is just it's Medicaid administration, not payments to providers. So that's everything.
So I think we're ready to go look at TANF. Representative Wallner, do you have a question?
Could we just take a look at the Medicaid administration lines?
Sure.
Just, I want to see if, how that is.
Let's
I
do
mean,
that.
if that's a lot lower than the governor's budget, I'd have to wonder how they're going to be able to do all this work. Okay.
So just Medicaid itself, I think No, that's not it. Now, at Medicaid Administration, we earn all across the department. It's not just in one area. But there is the Medicaid Administration Accounting Unit, which is just related to administering the standard Medicaid account, which is 7937. It's on page 990.
990.
So Ms. Rounds, while Representative Wallner looks at that and gets ready to ask you questions, based on what I've been thinking, I would like to see us going back to 2019 authorized personnel. Do you happen to know how many personnel permanent authorized there were for 19 in this line?
I don't.
So
And it's going to be very difficult to compare the adjusted authorized numbers by accounting unit for fiscal year 19 because we moved a lot of positions in 20 and 21 to be in the right place. So it would be very difficult to do by accounting unit.
So in general, what I'm thinking about proposing is for us to use all of the 2019 authorized permanent positions and not the 21 and not the proposal in 23.
Mhm.
So I don't know how to have that conversation because that sounds like it would be a very complicated, hard thing to do. But I would like to have. Go ahead.
I really can't have that conversation without telling you all of the potential consequences, right? Like we're not going to have as many beds at New Hampshire Hospital available. Our caseloads per caseworker in DCYF would go up. I'm not going to file reports timely with the federal government. We're not going to get every contract that goes to GNC will probably be retroactive. And, there are serious consequences for going to that level.
So can I tell you my simple, perhaps overly naive assumption though?
Sure.
And why I didn't think it was a crazy idea to begin with. And that is that whenever we heard the department talking, they had vacancy rates. And when I looked at in general, and I wasn't looking line by line, but in sort of a top-down big picture view, it appeared that the actual number of personnel employed in the permanent classified line was lower than the FY19 personnel or permanent authorized. And that gap would theoretically provide an opportunity to continue to hire and continue to help the department become more effective. That rolling back to 19 didn't actually represent a cut in employees because there was still room between that number and the vacancy number. Now, so we should schedule it and have a discussion about that. I don't want to do anything stupid, but I do want to talk through that concept.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's a little difficult right now because we've just come off of a year-long hiring freeze.
Right.
During that year, which we hired maybe 30 people, which when you're considering a 3,000 employee department, it's a little difficult to think that we could stay at the staffing levels we're at right now.
Yes, ma'am. I know. That's why we should have that conversation, and we'll schedule it.
Sounds good.
All right. So Representative Wallner.
I'm just looking at the Medicaid administration lines. So it looks like I assume what number is on the Representative Irf's document?
I would say it's probably the FY21 number of 5 million. in
Okay,
both
so that's what I
22
was thinking. So it looks like we're about $3 million short in each year of general funds.
Yeah, so that would be a fresh 6 million request. And given our last number, I think was 97 million, that would make us at 103. So Representative Irf, you want to correct us or clarify?
No, I just want to point out that so far what we've been increasing is the amounts, like the 3.1% increase and all of that, not necessarily increasing the workload, which I think is what would be in this account, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I think your point is that the administration line ought to be able to absorb the work because we're increasing the dollars moving, but not necessarily the workload underneath it. Is that
Kevin,
what you?
could you,
Is that what you? I just want to understand Representative Irf first.
Yeah, yes, sir. I'm sorry. Yes.
could I see Representative Irf's spreadsheet on the screen?
Yeah, give me a
This accounting
second.
unit.
What is this accounting unit? You're talking about the Medicaid services one?
Yes,
4700?
7937.
7937, right, sorry.
Representative Wallner, your hand is still up. Do you have? Are you going to have follow up?
Page 18.
Well, when
All right.
Karen, okay. It seems like there's something else going on here because we're collecting a lot more federal money on this line than ever before. So I would like to hear what an explanation of that is too.
1819, Kevin.
Okay.
So looking at like class 10, so going a little bit back to the personnel discussion we're just having, 22 and 23 are budgeted to include things like step increases, which are required by the union contract. And then of course, there's an extra pay period in 23. So by level funding it to 21 on the salary class line, you have essentially cut positions. And if that's what's happened all throughout this document, you've already cut positions all throughout the document because we won't be able to hire all the positions because we'll have to absorb any step increases in employees' pay as well as that extra pay period in 23.
You don't happen to know what your vacancies are in this line item, though? That would be a level of detail that no person could carry around in their head.
I don't, but I guess I'm just saying if that's what you've done in every personnel section, there are sections where it's fully staffed. And so we would need to transfer funds around the department to not lay people off. And then
you want to know what my real hope is, Ms. Rounds? Yeah. Okay, so here's my real hope, that Division 3 passes a really good conceptual budget that that the Senate will use as a reference point, and that the department will have a little bit more time to look at and be able to offer some good fine tuning recommendations to the Senate, and that after the Senate works on it, we still have a few months before the committee of conference locks everything down. And so I'm not, my goal, and maybe I'm wrong, but my goal is not to pass a perfect budget, but a really good one that communicates clearly a conceptual framework of what we're trying to do, knowing that it's whatever we do is going to get amended twice, and that we got a couple months to get smarter and to make those amendments and fine tuning. Not us, our division, but the Senate and the committee of conference. So I kind of trust the process that comes after us to clean up some of the details.
okay.
But at the same time, I don't want to hand off a a mess. So we're going to talk about the personnel issue. And if my concept doesn't really work, I'll change it.
Okay. No, and I appreciate that. I'm just trying to give you real-time feedback on what I'm seeing
Yep.
in this document. And I would have some of the same concerns with the benefits line. We don't have any control over what the benefits cost. And if people have changed plans and all that type of stuff, that certainly impacts the budget line.
Yeah.
The other thing I would,
Go
go ahead.
No, it was rude, so I'm sorry.
The other thing I was just going to mention is that class lines 40, 41, and 42 are all 100% non-general funds. So any changes you've made to those three class lines would not impact the general funds in this accounting unit or in any accounting unit. The 40, 41, and 42 are always 100% federal or 100% other or some mix of federal and other. There are never general funds in those three class lines. And that's the other thing too, when it comes to some of these class lines, there are times where the fund mix is different than just dividing by the numbers at the bottom. Some class lines may have a different fund mix than others, especially when it comes to the personnel class lines.
So I think that's why most budget people really like to have the ability to increase funding, because they don't have to worry about the details of having scarcity. And we're in a situation where we have to manage scarcity. And I don't know how, in the few weeks, even if I'd been looking at this budget for 10 years, I don't know how in a few weeks I would know all the fine tuning issues around scarcity. So
Right.
Representative Nordgren, you have your hand up, ma'am?
Yes. Yes, I guess Karen brings up concerns that we're all having, people who've been doing this for 20, 30 years, that this is a new way of doing it. And I think it's really important for her to point out the ramifications of this different process. So I would hope we could continue to go through the various line items that she thinks we're taking a risk in how we're doing the process. Thank you.
I agree with you completely.
And my biggest concern is the amount of work that some of these changes will create. I mean, it's not inconceivable that I would have to do a department-wide transfer like by month 4 of the first year of the fiscal year, if what I'm seeing here is true throughout the other class lines. So that's my concern. I think that, I don't know. I don't know exactly what to say, but certainly if you have areas that that you would like to see the funding change because you have, a different mission or, a different way that you think we should do it, I can help a lot in giving you information to help you understand what changing different funding areas are. But it's really hard when it's every class line like this, because we've made very specific decisions on how to reduce and increase things to try to come to a fair budget. So that's just my immediate reaction, having not spent a lot of time looking at this document.
Right. Okay, so to be fair with you, what my concern is I look at the personnel growth over the last, the prior budget, the current budget, the proposed budget. We're growing and realizing that the pandemic caused a hiring freeze, midway through the current year. That's created a big vacancy number. So my concern is that with that growth rate and the fact that we had the pandemic induced vacancy rate, if we accept the personnel growth as it is, we're asking the taxpayers of New Hampshire to fund government at a rate faster than the economy is growing. And that is not a sustainable position. We can't do that. And every time we hire a permanent classified employee, we end up with a long-term tail that is also unsustainable. We already have huge problems with our pension funds. So every person we put onto the pension funds, we're just aggravating that problem to another level. So I think what I'm trying to do, and maybe others are trying to do with this budget, is to figure out how to dramatically rein in the rate of growth in personnel, because it's not sustainable, but do it in a way in which we protect the current employees. We don't want to screw with their step increases, their promotions. We don't want to stop vital hiring, but at the same time, we have to ask management that in the context of an economy that just got sucker punched, and can we please tighten our belt the way businesses have had to tighten their belt? There are no businesses that I know of that are growing their personnel numbers at this rate. And I have a hard time being part of a process that allows what many people from the business world would consider to be an out of control personnel growth rate. So I'm trying to figure out how to balance this macro concern with the reality of the department, because I don't want to break the department.
May I make a suggestion? And fully stating that I don't support reducing any of our positions. I want to make that really clear. But if you were looking to reduce the number of positions and reduce the cost, so it's about 100 positions equals $5 million in general funds. Now, some people would want to break that down as one position is $50,000, but to really get to the 5 million, it takes 100 different positions, right? Because cost allocation, every position is a little bit different. So I wouldn't want to break that down to $50,000 per position, but it's about 100 positions is $5 million in general funds. So if you were looking to reduce the number of positions in the department by 100 positions, I'm just using that as an example, you could put a provision in HB2 that says the department's personnel lines, I should say, because they could be salary or benefits, shall be reduced by $5 million during the biennium. Or 100 positions would be 10 million for the biennium, it's 5 million a year. So you could do something like that, which would then allow us the flexibility to manage within a cost and not have as many positions filled at any one time.
Thank you for
that would also
that.
save the LBA from having to go in and key a lot of lines of information.
So Mr. Ripple, can you scroll down? Oh, no, that's already there. So it's just really faint. On 7937, permanent unclassified is 28. And I guess that's on, are we looking at Representative Earth's worksheet?
Yes.
Okay. So I would also like to be able to cause some of these lines to be keyed so that they get reduced, so that we maintain a baseline somewhere. There's got to be a baseline, whether it's 19 or 21. Like I said, my goal isn't to break things, but my goal is to represent the taxpayers' interests in having the management of Department of Health and Human Services accept the business realities of the underlying economy that pays the bills. And we can't allow personnel growth at this rate. It just isn't sustainable.
So go
ahead.
You could force that in the HB2 language and say that we must reduce the class lines in the appropriation.
All right.
So then when you come back for 24-25, those reductions would be represented in the class lines. We would go through and tell Department of Administrative Services where to make reductions. Because a lot can happen between now and June too, which is the other thing that makes me a little nervous about reducing class lines in particular areas. That the decision we might say today, well, if you're telling us we have to unfund this, I would do it here, might be a little different 4 months from now.
That's an excellent point. So if you wouldn't mind crafting some language around that and sharing it with us, then I think you would be fulfilling the role of helping me so I don't, or us, so that we don't break the department, but that we do something to put some personnel controls in place. I don't think anyone would view you as a traitor for doing that, because you're on the record as saying you don't support any of these cuts.
And I would, I'll work with Kevin on that. And I would just say that it won't break the department from a financial management point of view, but the commissioner would absolutely say that it would break the department from being able to run it effectively.
I understand. I never ran into a subordinate commander who didn't think they needed more people to do something. So, Representative Wallner, I think your hand has been up the longest.
Yeah, thank you. So just to go back to this area. So I'm looking at this and I have a note to myself here that the transfer to other state agencies here is a transfer to New Hampshire Hospital. And I assume that New Hampshire Hospital has earned this amount of Medicaid funding. And yet, because the way the document is designed, we use a much less line to fund them. I mean, it goes from actually 34 million in the governor's budget and then 36 in the 23 down to 20 to New Hampshire Hospital. I mean, what does that, what kind of an error is that going to go? What's going to happen there?
That is a class line that is 100% federal funds. I did submit a change request to reduce it a little bit because it is a little bit too high to match to what New Hampshire Hospital budgeted. But if that line was reduced below where it needed to be, I would have to go to fiscal committee and accept the additional federal funds to transfer to New Hampshire Hospital.
Okay, so
that's outside of what we're working on today. I don't think we're messing with federal funds.
but all of this, I mean, to me, in my mind, all of this, it does affect federal funds. So because when you get down to the bottom and you're looking, the federal funds are going to drop to 28 million when the general funds drop to 5 million in 22. And then
Let's bring Representative Urf in here because he's been working on these lines too, and I'd be interested in what he has to say about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of this discussion is moot for the following reasons. I've been waiting, Karen, to speak directly with you. I'm well aware of these issues. In fact, I've gone through the document you provided us that shows line by line, general fund, federal fund kind of breakdowns. And in some cases, I've actually applied them. The suggestion you just made regarding the wages, if you tell me what class lines they are, in other words, that's not, obviously it's not just 10 and 12, but the benefits and all that kind of thing, I can go through and make all those adjustments. And then we'll know exactly what the total is, the total differential is. And then we could say, yes, we need to reduce 50 positions, 100 positions, whatever the number may be. With regard to the point that Representative Wallner just brought up, again, that's something else I would automatically change. This was never intended to be a budget. It's not a budget. It's a place where it was easy for me to add things back in. And all the things that we talked about this morning that Mr. Chairman has brought up have been added back in. So we can see those totals. And I can do that progressively. When you have time, Karen, I would love to, Ms. Rounds, I would love to sit down with you and, because I can make these kinds of adjustments once I know what to do.
So probably we could go back to the governor's budget instead of Representative Verf's working document. Thank you. Representative Weiler, you've had your hand up for quite a while, sir.
Yes, thank you. I don't remember before seeing in all these budgets, all this additional fringe benefits. Now, the benefits are already getting close to 60–70% of the wages. And if is this just an excuse to hide the fact they might be at 80%? What are additional fringe benefits? We never used to see them in the budget. Now I see it in every line. Thank you.
You want to address that, Ms. Rounds?
Kevin, could you bring over Michelle Caraway maybe to explain it from DAS?
Sure.
You know, let's do it this way. It's 2:11. We're kind of at a good spot to break for lunch. So let's do that at 1 o'clock if you wouldn't mind. Representative Wallner, do you have a question or comment before we go to lunch? Okay.
Nope.
So because I sense that may be a longer conversation and a good one, let's use it to start at 1 o'clock. Is that all right with you, Representative Weiler, sir?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So is there anything that you need to say or want to say here, Ms. Rounds, before we lose our train of thought? Is there something that you've got on the tip of your tongue?
I don't think so. I guess I would say to Representative Verf about your request to sit down. We would definitely need to schedule time, and I would need to have probably all of my finance directors part of that meeting, because there are things in every accounting unit that are really specific that I don't necessarily know. So I'd be nervous to do it on my own.
So if you could work on some language, how long would it take you to come up with some HB2 language that might get most of what I'm looking for, which is some sort of a personnel ceiling that's lower than what's projected?
I don't think that would take long. I defer to Kevin, but I don't think it'll take long.
We should be able to get you something by the end of the day today.
Let's think that we're going to talk about it tomorrow then, please.
Okay.
Representative Verf, your hand is up. It's 2:13. You got 120 seconds.
This will be very quick. Ms. Rounds, I understand that. If you could, I know you could quickly give me the basic class lines. If you just tell me what those are, I can get going. I realize that's not the full answer, but that would get us partway there.
10, 11, 12, 17, 18, 19, 50, 59, 60.
Okay. And does the GFFF match vary from from account to account?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. I use the 5 million per 100 positions as an across the department average.
I understand. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, so if you would put up a sign, Mr. Ripple, that we'll be back at 1 o'clock and turn off the recording, then that would be great.
I will.
All right, enjoy your lunch.